All right, good evening, and thank you for joining us. Today we have members of the public joining us through the Zoom online meeting platform, some from their computers and some by phone. And the process for public participation will be the same as it was for a regular face-to-face public council meeting. So we ask that you hold your questions until the end of the meeting. And everyone is automatically muted when they join the Zoom meeting. Once the meeting is adjourned, I will ask for questions at that point, and we can go through the process to ask questions. So I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting of the District of Sechelt on Wednesday, June 3rd. It is 7:01 p.m. And we have an agenda in front of us. So first, before we look at adopting this, do we have any additions to the agenda? Councillor McLean.
Yeah, I'd like to add a discussion about the new BC Ferry schedule under new business.
All right. Any other additions or deletions? We'll take deletions too. All right. So as amended, I'd look for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And we have Bronwyn Armstrong with us tonight, representing the BC Child and Youth in Care organizations. So our first item on the agenda is the proclamation. So BC Youth, Child and Youth in Care Week, June 1st to 7th, 2020. So whereas children and youth in care have the right to safety and support for optimal development and social well-being, and whereas youth in and from care want to raise awareness about the barriers they face and fight the stigma that comes from being a foster kid, and whereas the District of Sechelt wishes to celebrate the accomplishments of children and youth in government care, including youth in youth agreements and children and youth in out-of-care placements, and whereas the District of Sechelt wishes to raise awareness and supports opportunities for children and youth in care to share their stories and experiences, to celebrate their successes, to contribute to society, and to meaningfully engage and connect with their preferred cultures, people, and communities. Now, therefore, I, Darnelda Seegers, on behalf of the District of Sechelt, do hereby proclaim that June 1st through 7th, 2020, shall be known as BC Child and Youth in Care Week in the District of Sechelt. Thank you for being here with us. I'm just going to throw this that I had the opportunity to take part in the parade today. So it was, I think we had about 12 or 13 cars and all decorated up, and we drove around the community honking our horns and people were waving. They were all, you know, signs on them and everything else. It was pretty special. Yeah, and did you have anything to say, Bronwyn?
Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm muted. No?
You're fine now, thank you.
Okay. Yes, I wanted to thank the District of Sechelt for their support in helping raise awareness and acknowledging this week as BC Child and Youth in Care Week. I am a member of the advisory committee that plans for these events. Now, given COVID, many of our events were scaled back. But I wanted to make sure that the council is aware that we're a collective partnership of youth service providers and allies working to challenge the stigma that many children and youth in care may face and celebrate their uniqueness and awesomeness. Again, the committee's goal is to raise awareness, shift negative perceptions, recognize children and youth just like all young people have individual talents and accomplishments. And it really means a lot that children's successes are often, I guess, increased when there's a supportive community in which they live. So it's great to hear that you guys had a rally and are acknowledging this week. We hope that all British Columbians will join the celebration and gain the knowledge and tools to acknowledge the unique, incredible young people who may or may not have time in care, but have had at least some experience with the care system. So thank you again to the District of Sechelt for taking action and standing with children and youth from care, the partners that are part of our committee. So when it started 10 years ago, there was really only the Federation of Youth in Care who acknowledged and ran the week. Now we have the Federation of Youth in Care Network, the Ministry of Children and Family Development, the Public Guardian and Trustee of BC, the Representative for Children and Youth, Adoptive Families Association of BC, the McCreary Centre for Mental Health Society, Federation of Community Social Services of BC, Fostering Change, BC Federation of Foster Parents, the Ministry of Education, as well as the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Training. So we've grown quite a bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So we'll move on to the minutes. So first I'd look for a motion to adopt the minutes of the 7 p.m. regular council meeting of May 20th. Moved and seconded. Any errors or omissions in there? All right, all those in favor? Thank you. Any business arising from the minutes? So move on to committee of the whole minutes of May 13th, 2020. Items 7.1, pages 15 through 18. A motion to receive and endorse. Moved, seconded. All in favor? All right. We move into bylaws. So let me get to the right page. Item 8.1A. This is for development permit area 8, intensive and infill residential. First motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And Mr. Allen, are you doing this one?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
This is a brief report that follows up on a council resolution from earlier this year, I believe February, which was based on recommendation from Council's Housing Advisory Committee. And the recommendation here is to amend a portion of the official community plan, specifically development permit area number 8, which is for the residential and intensive infill. And so what we do propose here is slight text amendment to development permit number 8, which would change the applicability of the development permit area. So it's not a wholesale review of the official community plan. It's not even a wholesale review of the development permit area. It changes the parameters for which it would be triggered through development, either at building permit or subdivision stage. And so staff have reviewed and put together a proposal for change, recommendation for first reading. The staff report identifies the 3 areas of changes. I will say we spent some time on this, going back and forth, banding about different ideas. And if you note on page 21 of the agenda, under the bullet or the number 3, there's actually, what I write here is not entirely what we meant. Where at the bottom of the last bold proposed text, it says on properties equal to or greater than 1,000 square meters, whereas in fact that should be equal to or less than 1,000 square meters. So I do apologize, minor error. Now is the appropriate time to point that out and make amendments ahead of referrals and consideration of reading. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think I had a question about that piece in the actual bylaw itself and whether or not that's reflected correctly in the bylaw. So we'll look at that when we get to that. Any questions for Mr. Allen? Mr. Councilor McLean.
Thank you. So the intent from the Housing Committee was to make these changes so a development permit wouldn't be required under a certain set of conditions. So assuming that an auxiliary dwelling is built, the property meets these conditions, and there's no other DPAs applied to this property, would they need a development permit?
Mr. Allen?
Sure, thank you. If it meets the, it's hard to describe. If it doesn't meet the requirements and there's no other development permit areas such as geotech, environmental, shoreline, et cetera, and the property is unencumbered, then it's straight to building permit.
Okay, so that's the intent of that. That's what I think the committee was looking for. And essentially, as it was written before, it would be very difficult to build if not impossible, to build a auxiliary dwelling without going to the development permit, which requires a much higher level of review and much more process. So what we're doing here is I'm hoping to make the process a lot simpler to build a second dwelling on your lot.
And
and that would be
sorry.
correct.
So, and Councillor McLean, with the changes that are proposed, do you see that providing the direction that your committee's looking for to the community?
Can you rephrase that question? I didn't quite get
Okay, so you were looking for changes to this DPA zone, right? Development Permit Area Zone. Will these changes as presented provide the change for the community that your committee was looking for? Do you think this will make it easier for them to move forward with secondary dwellings?
Yes, I do think it will make it easier. I don't think this change is to the extent that the committee was looking for, but it definitely meets the objective. So in terms of how far it goes, particularly some of the lot size requirements, we'll discuss that at the committee and bring it back. But for today, I'm happy endorsing it, given that planning has brought their expertise to it.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Allen? Yeah, Councillor McLean.
Would this have any effect on the upcoming zoning bylaw change?
Go ahead. Mr. Allen?
I apologize. I had a internet is unstable warning while
Okay.
Councillor McLean was speaking, and I missed it.
Okay.
Please repeat.
No problem. Would this OCP change have any implications for the upcoming zoning bylaw?
Well, we would certainly look at this, make sure they're compatible, and ensure that the zoning bylaw is written to be the most effective we can. So it wouldn't preclude us from changing zoning. Basically, it just determines when the development permit area kicks in. The zoning would say when you can have the dwelling, and the OCP says when the development permit area applies to the dwelling.
I think that makes sense. Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Allen, then on page 21, under number 3, you're saying the proposed text should read equal to or less than 1,000 square meters, correct?
Correct.
So then if we go to the zoning bylaw as proposed, the change on page 24, should that also say equal to or less than 1,000 square meters?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so make sure we reflect that. Should we move this forward? Any other questions for Mr. Allen? So we have 2 recommendations on page 19. One, that the official community plan amendment bylaw amendment 492.28/2020 receive first reading, and that pursuant to section 475 of the Local Government Act, respecting consultation during the development of an official community plan bylaw amendment 492.28/2020 be referred to the Housing Advisory Committee and Advisory Planning Commission. Someone like to make those recommendations? Councillor McLean, seconded Councillor Scott. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you. So we'll move to the actual bylaw, item 8.1B, and we have not given this first reading. So Joanne's on the meeting here with us. If we indicate that we want it to read on page 24, this would be the second bullet, actually 2.2, that it should read less. We're not amending anything, we're just putting it forward with that change. Is that right?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, my suggestion would be that Council first pass a resolution making that amendment, that the word greater be replaced by the word lesser in that paragraph, and then vote and carry that. And you could just move forward and give the bylaw first reading, because you will have already, in essence, made that correction rather than an amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I look for a motion. Councillor McLean? You'd like to make that motion that we change the word greater to less in second bullet of 2.2?
Yes, I'll
All
make
right.
that motion.
Okay, and Councillor Scott seconded that. All those in favor? Thank you. So let's look at first reading of District of Sechelt bylaw number 492-28 2020 DPA 8, being a bylaw to amend District of Sechelt official community plan bylaw number 492 2010. And I'd look for someone to move first reading. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you very much. So we move on to item number 9. This is new business, and this is BC Ferries, and we'll turn over to Councillor McLean.
Yeah, thank you. So as many of you may know, BC Ferries released a new schedule today. This schedule continues with the reduced sailings due to COVID. So we currently have 6 sailings a day, and we had 6 sailings a day yesterday. But what it does is it reduces the service day. It reduces the service day to about 12 hours. So we only receive ferry service for 12 hours a day, whereas in pre-COVID times, we would be receiving ferry service 16 hours a day, and yesterday we were receiving ferry service 13 hours a day. So they have reduced ferry service as we're looking to recover. So this ferry schedule is a slap in the face to every Sunshine Coast resident, business owner, and tourist. We're all working hard to restore our economy, and BC Ferry goes and reduces the service hours. This schedule is worse than when the traffic was down 80%. Now traffic's down about 30%, and greater numbers of people are using the ferries every week. This ferry schedule is a blatant attempt to cut costs at the expense of every single Sunshine Coast resident. The provincial government has been complacent in hurting the economic recovery of the Sunshine Coast. BC Ferries asked for a reduction, and the province granted it in April, and they granted it again recently. They've agreed to reduce the Route 3 ferry contract to 6 sailings a day and service for 12 hours a day. They could say that BC Ferries needs to return to the original contract, but they have not said that. I'm worried that this schedule will continue indefinitely. I'm worried that BC Ferries will continue to look for every opportunity to cut costs. If the schedule continues into July, we may as well ask every tourism reliant business in this community to permanently shut down. It would have a major impact if this schedule continues any longer. Every single business relies on the ferries, and it's critical to our economic recovery. We can't survive on 6 sailings a day, and the province needs to take immediate action along with BC Ferries to fix this.
Thank you. Councillor Toth.
Yeah, I believe I'm in the paper this week as having said that the sailing change was horrendous. And I do mean that as a small business owner. Makes it a lot more difficult for me to go into town to get supplies for my store and make a day trip of it. Means that I have to ship everything instead, which increases costs, increases commercial traffic, which actually has a compounding effect on reducing deck space for vehicles. I know that this is being worked on multiple avenues. You know, the regional district, we voted to send a letter and have the other governments co-sign it. I know that the Ferry Advisory Committee is planning on sending a letter imminently, hopefully today or tomorrow. I know that Councillor McLean sits on the FAC, and I'm happy to support any communications we make to BC Ferries or the provincial government to support restoration of that later sailing.
All right, any other comments? Councillor Rowe?
I'll just make a comment coming from the perspective of where I spent most of my parenthood, and that was with youth sports. And there isn't a single competitive sport that I can think of that can get off the coast and back and play any sort of game anywhere after school the way this ferry schedule looks. And I mean, the effect of that will just compound its way right through our community and youth. And it's this is a huge, huge problem. So obviously, I'm in support of whatever we can do to advocate for this to change.
Okay, I know that the people from Powell River have indicated it's a concern for them as well, because if a lot of times the first ferry is overloaded for, you know, goods, services, goods trucks, right? Like supplies. And then if they have to get up and take the one to Powell River, they're indicating that they won't be able to actually make the trip in one day. They'll have to stay overnight up there before they'll be able to come back, given the timing. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, it's not just deliveries to Powell River. I've talked to one local delivery company who says they will not be able to continue under this current ferry schedule. There was a huge struggle under the previous one, but they really need that late night sailing. I've talked to another delivery person who really struggles with the gap in the middle of the day. It's making it harder to get products to the Sunshine Coast, which is just going to increase cost and reduce the availability of getting stuff here. So it's not going to work.
Okay, so sorry, I'll just, the regional district, as Councillor Toth indicated, we brought this up at our last meeting because the schedule was changed without consultation. And I think the transit was given 3 days to change their schedule to line up with the new schedule from BC Ferries. So yes, there is going to be a letter coming from all of the governments on the Sunshine Coast. We've also requested that Chair Pratt and I have a meeting with Mark Collins and Brian Anderson. So the CEO and the head of customer relations or something. I don't really know what his position is, but his second in command. So we're looking to set that up. I did reach out today to find out if that meeting had already been set up and confirmed, and we don't have that yet, but we will be looking to have that happen as soon as possible. Councillor Rowe and then Councillor Toth.
I just sort of also thinking, and let me put it out there, in no way am I speaking for Vancouver Coastal Health, but has there been feedback from the local health authority at all around the ability to transfer patients off and back in a timely fashion for appointments and stuff? And is there any route of communication through the Ferry Advisory Council with regards to VCH, Matt? You know, might be interesting to reach out to see if they want to have an opinion or not.
All right. Councillor McKenna, do you want to address that? And then we'll go to the others.
No.
Okay.
The BCH doesn't have a position on the Ferry Advisory Committee, and I'm not aware of how BCH is in contact with BC Ferries.
Councillor Toth and then Councillor Kuster.
Yeah, two things, but before I go ahead, I know that Councillor Scott has been putting up his hand to try and get attention.
Oh, sorry.
So,
Councillor Scott, you're on the list.
But when I was listening to the radio today, I mean, this change is to facilitate additional service, Horseshoe Bay to Departure Bay. I don't know whether it's ship usage or terminal congestion or what it is. But I heard Deborah Marshall, the spokesperson for BC Ferries, advising everybody that they should make sure that they get reservations to make sure that they make it on the sailings, because they know they're going to be even more congested than normal. And when I heard that, I thought, you know that traffic is up, you know that things are going to be congested, and you're telling people to go pay you more money to make sure they get on the boat, which is just further insult to injury. And so I think when you have that meeting with Mark Collins, it may be worth mentioning the insensitivity of that suggestion from their media relations person.
Okay. Councillor Kuster.
Yeah, I mean, I agree absolutely with everyone. I just coming from a business perspective, we send our driver to town multiple times a week, and just trying to get him on the ferry on a regular day can be challenging. And now, if he misses that ferry, what are we supposed to do? I've talked to other business owners about that. Are they supposed to put their employees up in hotels in Vancouver because they can't get back home? This is our highway. We need appropriate service, and I don't think it's acceptable at all in any way. So I will support all these initiatives for sure.
All right, Councillor Scott.
Actually, all my questions were answered as I was waiting, so no questions on my end, but we need to go back to BC Ferries and ask for them to reevaluate the schedule, and I look forward to hear what Mr. Collins has to say about it. I can't see how they can justify that sort of reduction in that length of service day.
Okay. So today we had an announcement, or we had an invitation to attend a meeting. The chairs and mayors in the province had an invitation to attend a telephone conference call tomorrow with Premier Horgan and Minister Robinson. So, and we'll have an opportunity to ask a couple of questions. I'll work with Councillor McLean to put some of these points together and bring it up on that call. I don't know what our ask is. I mean, we want more service is what we want. So we'll see where that goes. What else would you like us to do? Who'd like to put something forward? Councillor McLean.
I'm going to do two motions here. First motion is to support the efforts by the SCRD to lobby BC Ferries for increased ferry service.
Okay, I think we already did that last meeting when they requested a letter, but we can do that.
No, this SCRD discussed it last Thursday, so this is our first meeting after that.
Okay. So that's a motion on the floor. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded. Any further discussion of the motion on the floor? Councillor Toth.
Do you actually mean increased service, or do you mean restoration of service? I know it's a small thing, but BC Ferries being under contract and whatnot.
There's two factors. Restoration of service means 9 sailings a day. That's what we'd normally be getting now, and we'd be getting 12 sailings a day in July. We can ask for that, but I think a more realistic ask is to just increase from what we have now. So recognizing that they do have major financial impacts, we might not need 12 sailings a day, but we absolutely need more than what we have now.
Okay, so I have a question for you. My understanding was that as of July 1st, the 50% requirement is going away. Has that been confirmed? I believe that came from Transport Canada.
I have not heard that, so it may be true.
Okay.
But from my study of BC Ferries utilization, is that 50% regulation applies to passengers only, and BC Ferries can still load a full ferry of vehicles without reaching 50%. So that's not the major thing holding us back. The major thing holding us back is a lack of sailings.
Okay. All right, so is the recommendation on the floor that we support the SCRD's efforts to lobby BC Ferries to increase sailings? All those in favor? Thank you. And Councillor McLean.
Yeah, so a second motion will be that we write a letter to the province and that the mayor advocates for increased ferry service to the province.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. All right. Thank you, Councillor McLean.
Thanks for bringing it up.
So we'll move on to item 10.1. This is a permission to proceed for rezoning application for multifamily development on Mills Road by Westcore Lands. And I'd look for a motion to receive the report. Moved, seconded, all in favor. Thank you. And who is presenting this one?
I will be, Mayor.
Thank you.
I've got a presentation prepared for you. If the host could just enable screen sharing, I'll put that up. Thank you. All right, this is a rezoning application for a multifamily development on Mills Road. It's for a 1 hectare assembly of 2 properties located in West Seashelt along Mills Road and Christian Road and Bly Road. And the intent of the rezoning is to allow for a 44-unit townhouse development. This is a snapshot of the current proposal. It consists of 11 buildings in total. The orange buildings are 8 two-story buildings with 4 attached 3-bedroom townhouses. The green signifies 3 three-story buildings with also consisting of 4 attached townhouse units, and those ones include a secondary suite. This is a snapshot of the current proposal for the site layout with a central courtyard or green space and access being provided off of Bly Road as well as Christian Road. The current OCP designation in the area is residential. This predominantly allows for a wide variety of residential uses. Intensive residential use is considered on larger assembly lots like this, where they're larger than 0.4 hectares, and this one exceeds that quite a bit. It's a 1 hectare lot. So the official community plan has several policies that support consideration of this type of density. The residential designation supports intensive residential use, including townhouses, on larger lots, and that's up to 35 units per hectare. There's also a special policy specifically for West Seashelt that further supports this. It's located within the urban containment boundary and the priority growth area of West Seashelt, and the lots are serviced with sewer and water municipal services. However, this proposal, the density proposed does exceed the expected density for the residential designation, and therefore a change to the multifamily mixed residential would be required. When considering OCP amendment criteria, the OCP itself lays out several guiding principles for consideration, including whether the application is in the best long-term interests of the community as a whole, that the community has been consulted, and that the proposed use has a high level of support in the community, that the proposed use is consistent with the overall vision of the community and local neighborhood, and that there's a demonstrated need for the use in light of the projected population and employment growth trends. Also that the proposed use is suitable for the site and compatible with adjacent land uses, and that water, sewer, transportation, and other community services are available. The proposal puts forward creative, sustainable, and innovative design approaches. And should this application proceed further, staff will assess each of these points and present that to council. The existing zoning on the lot is R3, which is a low density residential zone common in the West Seashell neighborhood. The proposed zone that the proponent has proposed is an existing zone in the zoning bylaw, the R4 zone, which is intended for a multifamily development, including apartment and townhouse attached type dwellings. It supports up to 40 units per hectare as it is today, with a potential to go all the way up to 83 units per hectare when there's a housing agreement associated with units. There are a number of variances being requested to the R4 zone and to the parking regulations. The main one is a reduction in the parking standards from 2 per dwelling unit to 1.5 per dwelling unit. The secondary suites will be provided with 1 parking space, which is what the bylaw requires. So 78 spaces in total would be provided. However, the current zoning bylaw would require 100. So that's a reduction of 22 spaces from what's required. To support this type of reduction, staff would be asking for a parking demand study to ensure that the proposed parking numbers work on the site, and a study that would further explore transportation demand strategies that can support that type of reduction. There's also a fairly minor variance to the front and rear setback, from 7.5 meters to 4.6 meters, and that's along the Bly and Christian Road frontages. So we have several recommendations for council today, and that's to prepare bylaws for first reading for the official community plan amendment, as well as the zoning amendment. There will be some amendments that would have to be done to the R4 zone, that we refer the application to the APC and other stakeholders, and that the applicant be required to host a public information meeting online pertaining to the proposed development, and that staff be directed to negotiate community amenity contributions in accordance with the official community plan. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is also in the gallery tonight if you have any questions for them.
Sorry, I was muted. Councillor Toth and then Councillor McLean.
Thank you for the presentation. Generally, I support this. Knowing the kind of car dependency our community has, I'm a little concerned with the reduction down to 1.5 stalls per unit. But I guess my question is, do we know the distance to transit for this property?
It's in fairly close proximity to transit. There is a transit line, I believe, going up Mason Road. But we would collaborate with the SCRD's transit department to determine exactly the location of transit.
And so I guess the follow-up to that is that transit is one of the stakeholders that this is referred to?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McLean.
Yeah, thank you. There is a kind of a park area. It's labeled as a community amenity. Is that counted towards the parkland dedication?
No, that hasn't been considered at this point. That would likely the development would be a strata development, and that would form part of the common property to be used by residents, but not as far as a park amenity for the general public.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because my comment was going to be that this park would not be accessible to the larger community. And just in general, I don't think that's the highest possible use for that park. Just a bit of green space with a path cutting through the middle of it. I think the proponent can do better. One potential option I'd like to see is a community garden. So given that there is very little private space for each of these units, the patio is quite small and there is no strict backyards. So give them a little space where they can have ownership over. They could do that, or they could potentially rearrange the site a little bit to take that space and make it into very small backyards for some of the units. But that's a very large change that I don't want to push upon the proponent.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question and I'll go back to Councillor Toth. I notice in the recommendations here that you're requesting that we refer the application out to stakeholders and agencies, etc., before we give it first reading. That's typically not our process, right? We would give it first reading and then refer it out. So what is in having you do that in this order?
In this particular case, because this is a fairly significant departure from the existing density of the surrounding land uses, we think it's appropriate to get early feedback, as well as OCP amendments do require early and ongoing consultation with stakeholders. So while it may be referred again after first reading to for a more in-depth review process, at this point it would be appropriate for the APC to make early comments in particular.
Okay, Councillor Toth.
Yeah, one that I missed the first time around. On page 48, it shows the proposed site plan. What's the purpose of the removable bollards in this case? Bollards being a particularly thorny issue for the district of Sechelt in the past. I just wonder why bother with them at all.
I believe that's something that the proponent has proposed at this point to discourage through traffic within the development itself. But there's been, no firm design choice that would remain.
All right, Councillor McLean.
Yeah, so I've reviewed this proposal in some detail, and if I'm understanding it right, the 3-level units will be the same height from ground as the 2-level units. So what that leads me to believe is that the units the bottom floor will be quite buried. It's not going to see a lot of daylight. So I'd encourage the proponent to look at options for increasing the amount of daylight that get into these lock-off suites. Because knowing what it's like to live in a basement suite with very little light, it's not the greatest situation. So if there is any way to bring in an extra window or two into these basement suites, I think that can really increase the quality of life for people living in those basement suites.
All right. Any other questions or comments? So we have some recommendations in front of us. What would you like to do? Councillor Rowe?
Oh, I was ready and then I would like to make a motion to move items 2 through 5. The council directs staff to prepare an official community plan and zoning bylaw amendment to facilitate the proposed multifamily development. Number 3, that staff refer the application to relevant stakeholders, agencies, and the advisory planning commission for comment. Number 4, that the applicant hosts a public information meeting pertaining to the proposed development. And number 5, that staff negotiate a voluntary community amenity contribution in accordance with policies contained within the official community plan.
Thank you. And there's a seconder for that. Any final comments? All those in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you to staff and thank you to the proponent. Item 10.2, draft 2019 annual report. First, a motion to receive the report. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And Ms. Rogers, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. In accordance with Section 98 of the Community Charter, Council is required to prepare an annual report before June 30th and make that report available for inspection by the public. The other section, Section 167, is the requirement for the financial statements. So you've got both of those together in the annual report. The annual report is really an opportunity for us to take everything that we've done in the last year and line it up underneath council's goals and see how we've done, and then take this year and how are we doing? Was there anything we missed last year that we can add to this year? So it's a really good bit of information for staff and for council and for the public, just to see how we're doing in achieving council's goals and what our plans are going forward. Unfortunately, the timing of your annual report is always sort of at the same time as budget. So if there was something that you're like, oh, I wish we had, it's too late. You've already set the budget, but there's always next year. But I think when you review the annual report, you'll see that we are making some really good progress on council's goals, and we've got some good plans in place for this year to continue to work on those goals.
Thank you. I enjoyed reading it. I mean, it's a long read, but I enjoyed reading it. Any questions or comments from council? Councillor Toth.
Yeah, admittedly, I'm not as prepared for this meeting as I'd like to be, given the time away that I'll address in my council report. When are the Sophie statements due out?
I believe Sophie comes out at the end of June. Mr. Douglas can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, at the end of June.
Okay. Is there a particular reason that they're not tied in with the annual report that's done up? Is that just a timing thing, a workload issue?
Statutory requirement?
The statutory requirement is that we do a statement of financial information report, and it includes the several aspects of the reporting that we do throughout the year, including the, sorry, the one you asked about.
Sophie?
Statement of, well, yeah, the SOPI includes a statement of financial information, which, sorry, I wasn't prepared for the question. It includes the remuneration of council and staff and suppliers over 75,000 and other information. So that's one report that comes out by itself, and it has its own due date and it comes out.
All right, I do know that the provincial government has extended the date by when we need to get this report in. I'm not totally sure what that is, but I know we have more time given the COVID situation that we're dealing with. Is that the new date that we're looking at as June 30th?
This is the old date. It was nice that they gave us an extension, but the work was done. So
Okay.
would have really liked the extension a while ago.
All right. Any further questions or comments? Councillor McLean.
Yeah, I just want to thank staff for putting this together. It's a really great summary, and I'm really happy with the progress that everyone is making towards a strategic plan. I just want to flag that I'd like to see council get together in a workshop whenever we can physically get together and review this and think about how the next 2 years of implementation of a strategic plan will look like. Because I think we need to take that bigger picture look at it again and see where those priorities sit. But that's not going to be anytime in the next few months.
All right. Question for you, Julie. How do people from the community give input or feedback on this? Because this is now out to the community for feedback. How would you like that to come to you?
Oh, well, the legislation states that it's out to the public for inspection. I don't quite know what that means, quite honestly, but we've posted it online. We've advertised that it is out online. We've also printed some paper copies, and we've made them available on the shelves in the library foyer, so people can come in and pick up paper copies. We'll keep an eye on that, and if we run out of paper copies, we will print some more. And then they can email us at the council at seashelt.ca or communications at seashelt.ca, and we can gather any feedback that they have from that.
Thank you very much.
Your worship, may I just add something there?
Yes.
We have, as required statutorily, we do have notices going in the next 2 editions of the Coast Reporter that inform people how they can make comments. And to add to Julie's list just now, we've also said in our notice that they can drop off in writing their comments through our mail slot on the wall at our Cowrie Street entrance as well.
All right, thank you very much. All right, no further questions or comments. There is a recommendation on page 78. Councillor Toth.
I will move recommendation 2 that the annual meeting to consider the 2019 annual report and any submissions received from the public be held as part of the June 17th, 2020 regular council meeting.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you, Julie. So we'll move on to item 10.3. This is Policy Directive 20-13, Temporary Expanded Service Area Authorization. And first I'd look for a motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And Mr. Allen.
Yes, thank you. Another report on our ongoing summer patio consideration. I think 2 weeks ago, Council, we knew that this letter was imminent. However, we did not know the content of it. And so it was hard to manage 2 weeks ago. So nonetheless, second report. But this one speaks particularly to establishments that have a liquor license, liquor primary or manufacturer purposes, whereupon when they commence the reopening of their restaurant, they can extend with the same occupancy outside onto patio areas or onto their property. And there's options here for council resolution to support the report for council resolution for each restaurant facility that would like to take advantage of this. And our recommendation is council resolution at this time, granting support to move forward and support any application that wishes to take advantage.
Okay, and then the final piece of that, I think that follows out of our conversation when this came before us before, in order to expedite this, that we delegate authority to endorse these to you as Director of Planning and Development.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Allen? Councilor McLean.
Yeah, so it's been 2 weeks since we discussed this last time, and we've had a couple internal emails about what the pilot program actually is. So I was wondering if Director Allen, you could explain that for the public's purpose. What is the patio pilot at this time? And particularly, are we going to be closing Cowie?
I got phone calls and emails about that. That was interesting. Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Allen.
Yes, definitely an insight into the robust conversation one could expect should council ever want to truly consider closing Cowie. At this time, there's two things. There's the patio consideration generally for patios on district property, be it sidewalks or roads. And there's also the ability for restaurants to expand, or I should say liquor primary or manufacturer licenses to expand their patio. That could either be onto our sidewalk or in very rare special occasions a road, but that could also be onto their own property. So these two issues are not one and the same, they're related. So to answer the question in seriousness, there isn't consideration to close Cowie Street. The pilot project itself, I can say staff have met with the Seashell Downtown Business Association. We've started guiding or drafting a guide for applicants should a merchant want to have a patio on our sidewalk and what the information might look like. So we're working on that. We're working on a template for a temporary license of occupation. And we're expecting the SDBA, for example, is evidently working on details of their proposal, and we are expecting other proposals. On to the letter at hand today. There are at least two facilities, manufacturer facilities, who wish to expand their occupancy outside onto their own property and who are waiting for consideration and our ability to endorse with an email or a letter to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. So we have a selection of issues here, and we are moving in the right direction to work towards seeing business recovery and reopening in a safe manner.
All right, Councillor Toth.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this is great movement forward. I did have one question about the recommendations, and then I'm happy to move them. Is recommendation number 3 sufficiently restrictive to apply to Policy Directive 20-13? Just looking at the wording, it's a little vague. I'm just wondering. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. And then I'm happy to move recommendations.
Mr. Allen.
If it follows in sequence with recommendation number 2, I would say so. However, should council wish to add in specific reference to Policy Directive 20-13, that it would be fine as well.
Councillor Toth, how would you like to move this?
Then I am happy to move recommendation 2, that council endorse the option provided by Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch to pre-approve temporary expansion authorizations for all liquor primary and manufacturer licenses. And I'm going to tweak recommendation 3 to read that the Director of Planning and Development has delegated the authority to endorse individual applications to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch under Policy Directive 20-13 if required.
All right, is there a seconder for those recommendations? Seconded. And Councillor Lamb, did you have questions or comments?
I had a couple of questions with regards to these patios. Could I, as a vendor, come and apply to the District of Sechelt and set up a patio in front of another business or a business that was not using the patio? I'm just sort of thinking like somebody's at the farmer's market on on Saturday, if they wanted to come like Monday to Friday or Monday to, 7 days a week, could they take up a patio space in Seashell if it wasn't being used?
When one could seek permission to use a piece of sidewalk for vending, I think that there would be some common sense used in an assumption that the use in front of a business would relate to that business. We wouldn't want to preclude access and egress to businesses or along the sidewalks. That said, if there were a special event through the summer, like a night market or whatnot, there may well be vendors set up on a street in a hypothetical sense that aren't related to adjacent businesses.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Councillor Lamb?
Yeah. So that's good. So the bricks and mortar stores would have first right to that. And then if there was like a night market or something like that, it would be up to the owners of those stores. If they wanted to participate with the night market, they could, but a vendor cannot come in and take up. I mean, there's very limited space in Seashell that could be used for a non-bricks and mortar vendor.
Yeah.
Anyways. Okay, cool. I'm good.
All right, one other question. Is the Downtown Business Association also dealing with other stores? So I know we're talking restaurants, et cetera, under this licensing piece, but what if one of the stores that has a fairly small interior wanted to expand out to be able to increase their footprint? Would they also be able to do that under this pilot project?
Under the pilot project, potentially, yes. Yes. Separating it from Policy Directive 2013, which is for liquor service, but the pilot project itself does allow for the potential for sidewalk use for retail uses and is not specifically exclusively for food service. It's really meant to enable businesses to open safely, to have more space for customers and patrons to safely use services.
Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, does the recommendation as modified in number 3 limit only to Policy Directive 20-13 and not allow you to be delegated the authority to deal with other applications?
It's a good question. I think that what we have tonight is specifically to deal with 20-13, so we can separate it from the other pilot project, which does endorse us to consider other applications.
Okay.
There's a third possibility whereupon a manufacturer or liquor primary wants a permanent patio that would require the full application to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, which would require notification and report back to council.
Okay. Councillor Scott and then Councillor.
Confuse the issue here, but there's another possibility.
Yeah. Councillor Scott and then Councillor Todd.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I view our decision today only for the liquor, the liquor side of it. The pilot project would deal with all the other bricks and mortar stores, and just my feeling on Councillor Lamb's great question there is I wouldn't want anybody in front of my store space other than for a special event if I chose not to partake in a special event. So I certainly wouldn't want to approve somebody just taking up space out there. So yeah, no, it's I think it's a great project. I think it's definitely worth looking. And
all right, Councillor Todd.
I was just going to point out that at the last council meeting, when we were talking about the patios, we did delegate that authority to staff to approve these things without having to come back to us. So this one very specifically about liquor related ones. And that's because of that policy directive. I mean, I know we discussed it at the regional district the next day as a late addition item. And we followed a very similar track up there as well. So.
All right, so there are 2 recommendations on the floor. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item 10.4, council policies with regards to COVID-19. First, a motion to receive the report. Moved, seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And Ms. Roberts.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, so we have 3 policies that I was looking for your consideration on. One is the reopening, the second is an illness and sick leave, and the third is work from home. And each of them have COVID-19 in the front of them because they are all specific to the pandemic. When the pandemic is over, we will resume our previous policy methods, but these would be in place during the pandemic.
Thank you. Any questions from council? All right, I have one question. I remember in a conversation with our MP last week, he was talking about the fact that, yes, here we go. The federal government and the province are working together to provide 10 days of paid sick leave. Do we have any details on that? And if so, how would that actually integrate inside of our current union agreement and policies, etc.?
If it came down to us, we could use it as additional sick leave. From what I understand of what the government came out with, it was for organizations that didn't have that paid sick leave. So we do have 18 days, 1.5 per month mandated in the bargaining unit. And so if it came that we were able to have that additional, we would certainly add that. But at the moment, we do have paid sick time.
All right. No questions or comments? All right. Councillor Rowe.
My only concern is that there's now 13 symptoms to COVID-19 that we're screening everybody for. And I kind of worry about this having stuff that's, so the symptoms in here are listed as coughing, sneezing, fever, sore throat, and difficulty breathing, which is 5. So there's, 8 other ones that we're asking people about. So that's one thing. And the second thing is that I don't know if the information changing is ever going to slow down with this virus. So how do we reflect that in keeping any sort of policy kind of up to date and accurate, I guess?
Similar to the reopening plan, we could reflect that the policy will be updated as per the evolving information. So you'll notice in the reopening plan that we've asked for staff input as per WCB's request. And so the reopening plan is actually quite vague. And so we could do that as well with the sick leave, and I could remove the symptoms and just speak to signs of illness.
Yeah, I think I would refer, maybe to like a BC CDC website or something where it's their responsibility to keep the information up to date, which would result in less work for you.
Certainly. And I do refer to the online assessment, and I believe that.
Yeah, I saw that. So
yeah.
That's good. Okay.
Okay, so Councillor Rowe, what page is that on? Because we'll need to look at modifying that.
Well, in each of the policy under symptoms.
Okay.
The symptoms of COVID-19 are.
So instead of listing the symptoms, you're saying.
Well, I'm not good at this, but
okay.
My opinion is that I would refer to some sort of health website where they do keep it up to date with whatever the newest information is.
Okay, Councillor Toth.
On page 167, the illness and sick leave policy for COVID-19. In that definition of symptoms, I haven't looked at the other ones yet, but it does reference that these symptoms may change as the disease changes, and the district will use the information provided by the BC CDC to identify any symptom changes. So I think that covers off what we're looking to address.
I suppose what I do hear from Brenda is that already, since I've written the policy and to today there's 8 new symptoms. So I can understand that maybe removing them might seem more relevant, or
I would remove them, because if I stop when I read it, I'm reading it. Oh, okay, I'm good. I don't have that. I have something that's not on the list.
So it sounds like, do we need these passed today? Could we have those changes done and brought back?
absolutely. We're still working under the, we have protocols in place, right? So we have our WCB phase 2 plan in place. And so all employees know that they're not to be at work if they have any signs of illness. So that to answer your question, that's no problem.
Mm-hmm. So maybe at this point, we could refer these back to staff for some modifications. Yep, Julie?
Sorry, I'm just wondering if it would be simpler if just for tonight, we agreed that under symptoms, this statement would just simply be employees with symptoms as outlined by the BC CDC on the, on any given date. And then the rest of it stays the same. So we just take out the symptoms, but just state symptoms as described by the BC CDC. And then you could approve it.
Yeah, and I believe that's what we agreed on. So if you were okay with that statement, then I could make those changes and we could approve that.
Okay, Council, how would you like to proceed? Councilor McLean?
Yeah, I'd like to follow the recommendation that Julie provided.
Okay, so that council modify the interim policies to reflect information from BC CDC and adopt 1.5.18 COVID-19 reopening, 1.5.19 COVID-19 illness and sick leave, and 1.5.20 COVID-19 work from home. Does that work?
Yes, as amended, Your Worship.
As amended, yes. All right. Someone like to make those recommendations? Moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded. All in favor? Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to item 10.5. Chief Administrative Officer's Report. First, a motion to receive. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And any questions of our CAO? Councilor McLean.
Yeah, just one regarding fields use. Do we have any idea under what conditions we'll be able to start accepting bookings for fields, or are we still too early for that?
Our parks manager is working with the BC Parks and Recreation Association to watch what the recommendations from that group are going to be, and that's in concert with the province. But it'll really depend on the Dr. Bonnie Henry changing the number of people allowed to gather in one place.
Okay, thank you. I'm just waiting to play some slow pitch.
Yeah, it'll be a combination of those two things, I think, before we get there.
All right, and today the plexiglass was installed?
Yes, it was finally installed by the end of today. And the office has been open for 3 days. There has been a number of members of the public coming in to deal with tax issues. Mr. Douglas has been handling that. They're happening outside. So we have a desk set up right by the front door, and it's all done that way for now. We'll be watching how things go over the next couple of weeks and then gradually opening up the office after that. We have some staff back in the office, and we'll be monitoring that over the next week or so and hopefully enlarging that as time goes by.
All right. Councillor Toth.
It's a good thing we're not using those wireless microphones today. Given that the interactions are happening outside, do we have a tent or something in place for inclement weather until such time as we are reopening? I just hate the idea of our staff having to sit around huddled under umbrellas in pouring rain.
Well, fortunately, the staff is actually indoors. It's the public that we'd make stand out in the rain to pay their taxes, which I guess would be really awful. But Mr. Douglas, did you have something to add on possible tent availability?
Yeah, there's no tent available. We have We have a large one that we put up just outside the building here at the back. And there is a bit of an overhang. So we're set up, our kiosk is just inside the front doors. So there's about a 4-foot, overhang. So anybody's being serviced will not be in the rain. And then we have line markers on the sidewalk. Of course, those people could be out in the rain. But we haven't found the need to get a tent, but if we get some bad weather, we'll definitely go and locate a tent and put it up. The other thing I just wanted to say is that we have had a significant shift from people paying in person to people paying online in the first 3 days. So we're quite happy with that.
I did hear that the homeowner grant website went down.
Yes, went down on Monday, and we were trying to help some people, so we had to send them away and get them to come back again.
All right. Any other questions of our CAO? Thank you, Mr. Yates. Moving on to council reports. So we'll start with Councillor Rowe, Councillor McLean, Kuster, Scott, Toth, and Lamb. So Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Don't have too much to report. Work is still busy. And we've moved the Respiratory Assessment Center from Seaside back to the hospital. So thanks again to staff. I attended the Let's Talk Water sessions, the Zoom that the SCRD put on, and I thought it was really well done. And I thought it addressed a lot of issues. And I don't know, I'm really liking Zoom for these sort of public events. And I attended the entire Silverstone public meeting before this meeting. And again, I was impressed with the presentation and the way that it worked. So that's been a bit of a bonus of COVID, I think, from my perspective. And that's about it.
Thank you. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, thank you. Last week I attended the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society annual general meeting. It's a small group of people who are doing a lot. They are trying to move 2 developments forward in Gibsons, as well as looking at other opportunities around the Sunshine Coast. So at the AGM, they lost a couple good people. They picked up a couple good people. It is still a fairly small group of people though. And Mike Asloff will be continuing as president. So they have that continuity as well, which is good to see. Last week I had a public discussion with Patrick Weiler, our MP. And I think he is honestly looking for ideas on how to create stimulus funding to the pandemic. He was really open to our ideas, and I'd encourage anyone else with ideas of how we could stimulate our economy to get back on track, to send them on his way. The government's ears are open at this point. And I think one of the key takeaways I had from that meeting is that tourism and the associated industry around tourism is really key to the recovery here on the Sunshine Coast. But there's a bit of a disconnect between what the federal government does and what funds tourism. That's more of an individual person type spending. So going back to our earlier discussion, I'd really like to see the federal government invest in ferries. Ferries are our lifeblood. If they can invest in getting us up to hourly service next year, probably not this year, but get the federal government to step up and really grow that link between us and the Lower Mainland, and that will be the biggest measure to stimulate our tourism economy. Finally, I had a meeting earlier today with a group called Velo Metro, and they have a product called Vimo. So they're a Vancouver company who wants to produce a electric assist trike. So it's kind of this bike with 3 wheels. It has a windshield and a roof. So it's a pretty innovative thing. And they are looking to apply to a grant to Innovate BC Fast Pilot Program. And what they need is a partner outside of the Lower Mainland to make their grant application successful or stronger. So as it happens, Carrie Ann and I know one of the founders who lives on the Sunshine Coast. So that's kind of how it got brought up to us. And what they're looking for from the District of Sechelt is they want our staff to try out this new model that they're building and provide feedback on what's it like for a typical work environment for those people to be using these electric assist trikes. Because it's a completely new model. It's something that hasn't been seen too much before. So they would love to partner with us. I think it's fairly early stages. We need a bit more conversation with them. But what I would like to do is send out a survey to our staff members to see if they are interested in something like that. There'd likely be no cost to us in the short term. And if the pilot is successful, we may purchase a couple of these bikes for our staff to use down the road. But coming from that, I'd like to make a motion that we survey our staff about electric assist bikes and trikes usage. See if they're interested.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded. Any questions or comments? Councillor Tom.
Great idea to do the survey. What are you looking to survey them on? Whether they use them, whether they'd be interested in using them? Yeah.
Whether they'd be interested in using them. Because I think it's a great idea, but I haven't talked to our staff members to see if they would be interested. So I want to get a bit more of that before we go too far down the road.
Councillor Rowe.
So the city of Nelson, or what, I'm not sure if they're a city, but anyways, Nelson did something like this, not with this tricycle, but with electric assist bikes, and the staff who trialed them, and they ended up, I mean, they have a different way that they were able to do it, where it was eventually offered to staff, and there was because they have their own power plant, they were able to pay for it in installments with their power bill, et cetera, et cetera. But the moral of the story is Matt's idea. That's exactly what they did in Nelson. They surveyed their staff, there was interest, and then they found a way to make it happen to help reinforce the whole active transportation goal that they have as a community. So I think it would be great to at least survey staff and see if there's any interest.
All right, any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the recommendation? Can we be included too?
I'll make sure the survey gets sent out to us as well.
Good, thank you. All right, Councillor Kuster.
Okay, what have I done? Well, I also attended the Let's Talk Water with the SCRD, and like Brenda, I did find it informative. I actually find that I'm a person that actually, if I hear things as opposed to read them, I tend to retain them better. So I actually really enjoyed listening to it, getting the background and listening to all of the questions that were brought forward. So that was really good. I attended APC last night, with which they were doing Green Court. And again, very happy with the new APC members. There was a good turnout, and there's just such a great background there. So just like different ideas coming forward. So I think that it's really good to have that number of people and just the different backgrounds. So that was good. And I also listened to the trellis tonight, like Brenda. And again, Zoom is actually good because it allows me to I can do it right away. So I don't have to, I was listening to it while I'm, at work. I could stay there for a while, whereas before I'd have to drive or go home. So it's actually, it works out really well. And again, good presentation and good questions by everyone, and very informative. Personally, just dealing with my graduating dilemma, and I've had to come to terms that I am not going to see my daughter get her diploma this year, and it's very sad, but they are going to do their video this Saturday without parents watching, and yeah, so I've had to come to terms with that. That's very disappointing, but that's it for me.
Councillor Scott.
Okay, I attended via virtual meeting the Community Forest Legacy Assessment, and that's where we sit down and look at the preliminary submissions for the funding that we have available going forward for this year. Unfortunately, it's not very much, but it's something. So we went through and some great submissions. Unfortunately, I think there was probably 50 times the amount requested to the money we have to give, but we've asked for some of the good submissions to come forward with some more information to get to the next stage. So looking forward to see that. The Let's Talk Water, I really enjoyed that as well. It was a great presentation. I did find it disappointing. I mean, a number of our council were part of the panelists, and I think what I had read is that there was 22 attendees that weren't panelists. So I thought that was pretty poor attendance considering the amount of feedback we get on the lack of water on the coast, for people to have a better understanding as to what's going on and what it takes to add water. So I was disappointed to see the poor, what I feel is a very poor turnout for that presentation. So if they consider doing it again, I hope more people come forward. And other than that, just working. Yeah, just back in the air, steady and slow recovery, but it's moving up. Just it's going to take quite a few years. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much. Councillor Toth.
Try that again. As the CAO reported, we're planning on sort of reverse Canada Day parades. We're doing 3 of them to do our best to reach each community in Sechelt because they can't gather downtown. Unfortunately, we can't travel every road, but we have tried to do what we can to sort of spread the routes out and make as many turns as we can to reach the people. Registration for that is free and open now to anybody who wants to participate. It's on the SDBA website, which is secheltdowntown.com, and it should be getting some other social media shares and promotions shortly. I just wanted to thank Siobhan, our Arts and Culture Coordinator, for all the work that she's done in representing the district on that committee. We had to have at least one late night phone call to hash out some details, but the committee as a whole has been very fast moving and responsive to changes that have come from VCH and the government. I also attended the Trellis information meeting this evening. I found it to be quite informative. I think there were 95 people on the Zoom call. And on a personal note, I was in Grand Forks for the last 4 days, so I didn't get to prepare for this meeting very well. I was working on sandbagging and pumping and other flood mitigation measures. The river forecasting was swinging for us between 2018 flood levels and 5-year flood levels. We actually ended up at one point under a full evacuation order. My business partner and I stayed along with several residents to do what we could, but we had to make sure that our residents with children left. The systems and communications are interesting to see in other regional districts and other areas to see what they do. And apparently they've vastly improved since 2018. But unfortunately, they haven't actually done anything additional to prepare for any flooding. So I look forward to working on lobbying councils elsewhere for some changes to regulations. Ultimately, we ended up with a 20-year flood level and still about a foot of freeboard on our dike. So it was, in the end, a waste of a trip, but I'd rather have gone and wasted my time than not gone and needed to have been there. So that's me, and that's why I'm not that prepared for this meeting.
Thank you, and I'm glad you didn't have worse results. Councillor Lamb.
I attended the Chamber of Commerce meeting this past week. They had some concerns about the patio, the process the district is going through with new patio business thing, but I think we've addressed most of those tonight. They wanted to know, you know, what, I guess, wanted to know if there was many developers or what the, you know, what was going on with the potential for, you know, development in our community, if there was people, if there was, you know, businesses or people from offshore looking at expanding or coming to see us. And then we just talked briefly about the Water Resource Center and the potential for reclaimed water and what, you know, what we were, you know, where the district was going with that. So, and that's basically it. I was at Let's Talk Water, so I attended that also, but yeah, that's good. I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll address the Let's Talk Water first. I was one of the panelists there. And yes, I was disappointed as well about how many people from the community attended initially, but we had staff following up on the YouTube posting. And by the next day, we'd already had 150 people who had viewed it. So I didn't ask what the numbers are now, but they anticipated that they would get a lot more coming forward and watching that because it was taped, it was posted. Again, another advantage of doing this format. I had the opportunity last weekend to talk with the mayor from Playa del Carmen. So they obviously are dealing with COVID-19 down there, and by her estimate, they're about a month behind us up here. So we talked about processes, policies, things that we'd done there and here, and kind of commiserated with each other about the impact. We haven't had the same impact that she's had. She started by saying 4 of her immediate staff members died from COVID-19. So we've been really lucky here in that our staff have not come down with this. We have not lost anybody on our staff. They are actually setting up a special COVID-19 hospital down there because of the numbers. She did ask about things like, how did you set up a food bank, right? How are you getting the funds? And was really impressed with the federal government and the provincial governments up here, how they've come together and moved some of these things forward. She said they're still doing some partisan politics kinds of things down there, and it hasn't quite sorted itself out. I attended, what else did I attend that we want to talk about? Community, Sunshine Coast Community Forest meeting. They had their meeting this past Monday. It was their board meeting. They are looking at getting into logging. As I mentioned before, their forest stewardship plan has been approved. They have the applications in for cut blocks, and they're looking to get some of that done. They will not be able to log now until the fall. We're into the dry part, even though we're getting a lot of rain. It's still pretty dry out there. They're not going to be able to log right now. They're hoping to get those in place for the fall. Today, I took part in the Youth in Care parade, as I mentioned earlier. And then I had the opportunity to go to Hackett Park and present a plaque on behalf of the District of Sechelt, or a little certificate, to Judy, one of the SCACL members who has worked for the District of Sechelt for 35 years. And she was thrilled with the recognition, and she's so excited that she gets to retire now. So it was good to see. I did want to mention that tomorrow we do have, as I mentioned, the call with Minister Robinson and the Premier. So we're bringing those sorts of things up. The BC Ferries for sure. Government show again tomorrow night. Friday is an iced tea meeting. So Friday I will be, I become one of the board members on Friday. I put my name forward and there we were all put in by acclamation. And then what else is happening? Parade or the grad on Saturday. Yes, I will be going in and taping a speech. I understand. I asked how does this work, right? What's going to happen? And they said what they're doing is they're bringing 14 students in at a time. They will come up and walk across the stage. They will get videotaped. And then they have a company that they've hired who's going to do all of these videotaping and then put it together into a video that will be aired on the 24th of June. So at that point, they will be, you know, having, like, families can get together to have viewing parties, etc., to see this. And I asked about the scholarships because the District of Sechelt gives away 2 scholarships. So how does that work? What they won't know until the 24th who actually gets the scholarships. But then as part of the little piece that the teachers say on each of the students and on the screen, it will actually indicate who got the scholarships and, you know, how much, etc. So they will know at that point. So it'll be exciting to see. I've heard, yes, some people, I mean, I understand it's a totally different experience. And some of the people who contacted me who have children who are graduating indicated that one of the advantages now of this is they will actually be able to share this with other people in other parts of the world. So they're going to be sharing the actual event. Sunday is an event. It's Walk for Peace and Inclusion. Been working on what this is going to look like to ensure that the organizers are following the guidelines of no more than 50 in a gathering. That will be on Sunday at 1 o'clock, starting at Hackett Park, and there is a route. People are invited up and down the coast to join in. Bring your face masks. You will probably need to wear your face mask. There will be a very short speech at the front, like a couple of minutes, and then there'll be a walk. But it's just to show that we as a community are looking for inclusion. Everybody's included. And I think that's my report. Councillor Toth.
Yeah, just something that you mentioned with the grad stuff, and perhaps Councillor Kuster or Scott can clarify. If the grad ceremonies are being recorded and able to be shared all over the world with people, how do they plan on handling privacy and protection of minors? Because I know that's a big deal for school events, not recording and sharing on social media or photographing minors in events.
Okay, you both want to go? Who wants to go first?
Well, I was gonna say, that's a great question. Don't know the answer to it, Alton, but it might be something to bring up. Yeah, I understand that they're gonna be airing it on the district's website. That's how I understood it when we had a meeting yesterday with the principal. And then I think we're all gonna get copies as well. Still not 100% clear on that, but definitely a good question. So maybe I'll have to look into that, unless Eric possibly knows.
Yeah, no, it was my understanding that we're all going to get copies to distribute as we see fit to whom we deem appropriate. The airing on the website, my understanding is it wasn't going to be a permanent recording, so it was just to be aired live. So I'm not sure if that creates any challenges, but yeah, no, other than that, I think I'm pretty sure it wasn't a permanent recording on that website.
All right. Councillor Toth, SCRD report.
I get to go again. There it is. Happy to take any questions. Apologize for any possible typos that might be there. I was busy knocking this off real quick before I had to skip town. So I'm hoping there's no problems with it. Jennifer didn't indicate there were. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Councillor Toth?
I guess the one thing I do want to highlight out of the report is that the Church Road loan alternative approval process will be going forward. The first ad for that will be coming out on June 5th, which is in 2 days, and that is the official opening of the AAP. We need this infrastructure. We need it desperately in order to help close our water supply deficit gap. Happy to answer any questions for anybody who is concerned about it and is considering signing an AAP, because I would rather convince them of the merits of the project than have them submit a counter signed petition that could result in a failure.
All right, any questions for Councillor Scott? Sorry, Councillor Toth. Councillor Scott, you could answer the questions too. All right, let's move on to council correspondence. First, a motion to receive the correspondence. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And all four are on here for action. So, Councillor McLean, did you want to speak to the first one?
Yeah, thank you. So this is essentially a request from the Affordable Housing Society. They're looking to get a little bit of staff support. It's a volunteer team who is doing way too much for a volunteer organization. So these projects would be in Gibson's, but they are a Sunshine Coast wide organization. So just increasing the general organizational capacity, I think, will really do good things for affordable housing in general.
So they're looking for a letter of support from us for the grant application.
Yes.
Okay, would you like to make that recommendation?
Yes, I will move that the District of Sechelt write a letter of support for the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society for the Community Housing Transformation Center grant.
Is there a seconder? Seconded. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? Thank you. And the second one, this is from Sunshine Coast Tourism. So we went to Sunshine Coast Tourism with a few questions. One was with regards to the OAP, the Online Accommodation Platform Guidelines. And they are looking for a letter of support from us on that, and also a letter of support for the MRDT renewal application. Any questions? Councillor McLean.
Oh, I was going to move. So
You're going to move the recommendations that we provide 2 letters of support as per their request?
Yep.
All right, is there a seconder? Seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And the third one. This one is with regards to short-term rentals. And Mr. Allen, did you want to talk to this?
I don't have anything specific to add. We can certainly commence with investigation, have bylaw enforcement review this scenario, a fact check letter, indicate what is actually happening on site, and determine what, if anything, can be done to ensure compliance.
This brings a bigger question, though, does it not? And this is something that we're looking at inside of our zoning bylaw around how do we deal with short-term rentals in Sechelt. We do have a bylaw around short-term rentals. It's old. It's been, I mean, it was put in place way before, you know, the internet started to be used for booking of short-term rentals. So could we refer this, I guess I'm looking to you for a direction on this. If we referred this to staff to say, we'd like you to look at this, this incident basically, but also look at our short-term rental bylaw in light of the fact that we're redoing our zoning bylaw, and come back with recommendations? Would that be now, or do you want to wait until the zoning bylaw is done, or roll it all in?
Ideally, we roll into the bylaw. We do need to find a way to increase our progress on that project. But there are 2 ways of looking at short-term rental regarding mandatory on-site operator or allowances for operation without operator and solving that piece, or under what conditions could potentially each of those apply. And it is a big discussion. It's so big that it might either A, take over the zoning bylaw project or potentially get lost within the zoning because there is such a host of issues. So there might need to be a way to draw that out and have zoning bylaw related engagement sessions specifically for this particular topic.
So at this point, we should just refer this to staff and then you'll look at how to deal with this and come back with some recommendations.
Sure.
Right. Councilor McLean.
Yeah, I'm fine with that recommendation. I do think we need to consider splitting the short-term rental from the zoning bylaw. The intent of the zoning bylaw change is to reflect the OCP. And I don't think short-term rentals are really considered in the OCP. So although they're both zoning issues, I think they are different and it could be a distraction. So happy to refer to staff, but yeah, I think they need to be separated.
Okay. Councillor Toth?
Well, and further to that, unless I missed a meeting or two, I don't recall us having a very in-depth discussion on where we're going with short-term rentals. And I think until we have that conversation, it would be short-sighted or ill-advised of us to be providing some direction to staff until we have that conversation more fully.
Okay, so a recommendation that this be referred to staff. Their seconder? Seconded, all in favor? Okay. I think another piece around the short-term rentals is Gibson's has passed their bylaw, I believe, around short-term rentals. Regional District is waiting to do a public hearing. They haven't, we don't have guidelines from the province yet as to how to do those, I don't believe. So they're, or maybe they just came out and they're looking at how they do that to move that forward. As we've looked at with others up and down the coast, we might want to consider what they've done and see if we want to do something fairly similar or not, right? But at least we should bring those forward as well. All right, our last piece of correspondence. This is for the Water Supply Advisory Committee for the district or the Sunshine Coast Regional District. And they're requesting that if we would like to, we could appoint a non-voting member to that committee. Would we like to do that? And if so, who would like to put their name forward? Councillor Lamb, are you up for that one? Given you're doing everything water these days? You're muted. Yeah, there you go.
There I go. Yes, I can jump on that bandwagon. Yeah, non-voting. Yes.
Non-voting, that's right.
Yeah, that's fine.
And the first meeting will take place in early July, the inaugural meeting.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Sure.
It's not voting, but not silent.
That's right.
I'm muted.
So a recommendation that Councillor Tom Lamb be appointed as a non-voting member to the Water Supply Advisory Committee of the SCRD. Is there a seconder? Seconded? All those in favor? You got it.
Good job, Tom.
Right. All right, any other emergency items to come forward? Nothing? All right. So we're going to move in closed session under section 91A, C, and G of the community charter. Like a motion to that effect?
We have to.
Yeah, moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And then we're going to see if there are any questions from the gallery. And we'll wait until we